The murmur moved through the room before anyone could name it. Not applause. Not the usual swell of a grand entrance. Something else. The kind of sound a room makes when 200 people simultaneously stop breathing. Julian Thorne set his whiskey glass down on the nearest surface, without looking for it. Across the Grand Velour Ballroom, New York's most untouchable venue. The kind of place where a single seat cost more than most people's annual salary. Every conversation had died mid-sentence. Every head had turned toward the entrance. And Julian understood why. Mia Solis was standing at the top of the curved marble staircase. Mia, who sorted his calendar at 6 a.m., who fetched his coffee, 2 sugars, never stirred, who had spent the last 8 months at the desk outside his office, so efficiently invisible that he had genuinely, on 3 separate occasions, forgotten her name. That Mia, standing in a dress that made every other woman in the room look like she had dressed in a blackout. Dusty rose, not pink, not blush, dusty rose. The kind of color that exists only in a certain quality of light, shifting like the surface of still water. Thousands of freshwater pearls were sewn in spiraling constellations from shoulder to hem, each one catching the chandelier light and throwing it back differently. The cathedral train followed her like smoke that had decided to become solid. The silhouette was architectural, precise. The kind of precision that doesn't come from a factory or a machine or anything that can be rushed. Is that someone behind Julian breathed, then stopped. That's an Elena Solis original. A woman to his left, voice fracturing on the last word. I was in the front row at her Milan closing show. That dress, that is the closing piece. That dress is worth $2 million. A silence so complete that the chandeliers seemed to hum louder. Julian's mouth was open. No sound came out. Behind him, Bianca had gone the color of the tablecloths. And Mia Solis, the woman whose last name he had never once bothered to learn, descended the staircase like she had been descending staircases her entire life. Which, as it turned out, she had. Mia Solis arrived at Thorne Enterprises every morning at 7:52 a.m. Not 8. Not 7:45. 7:52, early enough to have Julian's schedule printed and his coffee cooling to the exact temperature he preferred before he walked through the door at 8:04. He had never once commented on this. She had never expected him to. Her desk sat outside his corner office on the 37th floor, a clean rectangle of organized efficiency that revealed nothing about the person behind it. No photographs. No personal items. A single succulent in a plain white pot, the one concession she had allowed herself, which Bianca Thorne had once glanced at and said, without breaking stride, "That looks cheap." Mia had watered it the next morning anyway. Julian ran Thorne Enterprises the way a surgeon runs an operating room. Cold precision, zero tolerance for noise, an expectation that everything necessary would simply appear before he needed to ask. Mia made sure it did. She fielded his calls with a voice that gave nothing away, rerouted his schedule around his moods without being asked, and absorbed his dismissals, the emails unanswered, the instructions issued to the wall above her head, with a face she had perfected over 8 months into something unreadable. Bianca swept through the office twice a week in outfits that cost more than Mia's monthly rent, trailing Naomi Pierce and Lexi Dumont like a private audience. They looked through Mia the way people look through furniture. It was not personal. That was almost the worst part. At night, Mia went home to a studio apartment with a second-hand kettle and a mattress that was slightly too soft. She had chosen all of it deliberately. 8 months ago, she had made a deal with her mother. 1 year. Nobody knows. Not yet. It happened on a Tuesday, 3 days before the Thorne Annual Gala. Bianca was perched on the edge of Mia's desk, not sitting, perching, the way people do when they want you to feel the social distance, with Naomi and Lexi arranged behind her like punctuation. Julian came out of his office, holding a cream envelope, the kind that gets hand-delivered, the kind with a wax seal. He set it on the desk in front of Mia with 2 fingers, the way you set something down when you want everyone in the room to watch you do it. I thought you deserved a night out. His tone was light. Collegial almost. The word almost doing a great deal of work. Mia looked at the envelope. The Thorne Annual Gala. $10,000 a seat. Every name in New York that mattered in one room for one night. That's very generous, she said. Her voice gave nothing away. Julian had already turned back toward his office. Bianca's smile arrived a half-second too late to be genuine. Naomi and Lexi were already looking at each other with a specific expression of people saving a joke for later. Mia waited until she heard Julian's office door close. She waited another 4 seconds after that. Then she picked up the envelope, slid it into her bag with the same efficiency she used for everything else, and walked to the kitchen to refill the coffee. She heard them from the hallway. She'll show up in something from a department store. Lexi's voice. Then laughter, quiet, shaped specifically to Carrie. Mia set the coffee pot down, stood very still for a moment. Then she walked back to her desk, sat down, and reached for her phone. She typed 2 words. Mama. Dress. Here is what nobody at Thorne Enterprises knew about the woman with the second-hand kettle. Mia Solis's mother was Elena Solis. If that name didn't stop you, you weren't in fashion. You weren't in art. You weren't in any room where the walls held things worth looking at. Elena had built her design house from a single rented studio in Lagos with 3 bolts of fabric and a second-hand sewing machine that skipped every 4th stitch. By the time Mia was 10, Elena's gowns were on Grammy stages and the shoulders of women whose names appeared in history books. By the time Mia was 16, 3 international museums had requested pieces for permanent exhibition. By 20, Elena Solis was not a designer. She was a language, a shorthand for a particular kind of beauty that didn't ask permission. Mia had grown up inside all of it. Private schools, apartments in London and New York, front row seats at every show, every season, every city. A name that opened doors so efficiently she had never once had to knock. And that was exactly the problem. At 24, she could not tell, had never been able to tell, where Elena's world ended and her own began. Every friendship, every opportunity, every room that welcomed her, all of it arrived through the same door with the same name on it. So she made a deal. 1 year. No access to family accounts. No use of the Solis name. A real job in a real city, starting from the bottom of someone else's empire to find out what she was made of when the inheritance was removed. Elena had cried, then agreed. One condition only. If Mia ever truly needed her, she would be there within 24 hours. No questions asked. Mia had not called in 8 months. Until Tuesday. The intercom buzzed at 6 a.m. the following morning. Mia pressed the button. A voice she recognized. Her mother's head stylist. Calm and precise as always. We're outside. Plural. Mia looked at the intercom panel for a moment, then buzzed them in. They came up in 2 elevator loads. The stylist first, then 2 assistants, then the makeup artist, each of them carrying black cases with the quiet efficiency of people who had done this in far more complicated circumstances. They moved through her studio apartment without comment, past the second-hand kettle, past the succulent on the windowsill, past the single bookshelf with its borrowed paperbacks, and began setting up with the focused calm of a surgical team. Last came the garment bag. The stylist unzipped it slowly, the way you handle something that has its own gravity. The dusty rose gown came out like a living thing. It caught the early morning light from the apartment window, thin, ordinary light, the kind that makes everything look slightly tired, and refused it, scattered it, threw it back across the walls in ways that light from that window had never moved before. The freshwater pearls spiraled from shoulder to hem in constellations that seemed to shift as the fabric moved, and the cathedral train settled on the studio floor like something that had been waiting patiently to exist in this specific room. Tucked inside the garment bag was a note. Handwritten, her mother's hand, fast and certain, the way Elena wrote everything. You were never invisible. You were just choosing to be quiet. Come home when you're ready, Mama. Mia folded it carefully and put it in her pocket. Then she sat down in the chair they had positioned by the window and let them work. 5 hours later, she stood in front of the mirror. The woman looking back was not Julian Thorne's assistant, was not Elena Solis's daughter, was not anyone's idea of anything. She looked like herself, finally fully herself. She picked up her bag and walked out. She arrived at the Grand Velour Ballroom at 9:17 p.m. Not fashionably late, not strategically timed. Simply when she was ready, which happened to be 9:17 p.m. The doors were open. The music was playing. 200 people were doing what 200 powerful people do at events like this, performing ease, performing connection, performing the specific kind of effortless confidence that takes enormous effort to maintain. Mia walked through the entrance and did not perform anything. The murmur started near the door and moved inward like a current finding its channel. She didn't rush. The cathedral train followed her across the marble floor like smoke that had decided to take a direction. The crowd parted, not intentionally, not with any coordinated awareness. The way crowds part when something moves through them that they don't quite know how to stand next to. Phones came up. A glass went down too hard on a passing tray. Someone stopped mid-sentence and did not finish it. Mia crossed the floor and stopped in front of Julian Thorne. He was mid-conversation with two men she recognized from his investor files. All three of them turned. Julian's expression moved through several things quickly and settled on nothing. "Thank you so much for the invitation." Her voice was warm. No performance in it, no edge, no satisfaction visible on her face. Just warmth, clean and genuine. "This was incredibly generous of you." Julian's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "You told me to wear whatever I had." She touched the dress once, lightly, at the waist. "I hope this is appropriate." The silence around them had grown its own weight by now. Then a woman's voice from somewhere behind Julian, a fashion editor. Her tone fractured with disbelief, cut through everything. "That's an Elena Solis original. That dress is worth $2 million. The room detonated. Julian Thorne discovered what invisibility felt like in 19 minutes. He knew the exact duration because he checked his watch twice, a habit from a life built on the premise that time was the one thing he controlled absolutely. Tonight that premise was not holding. The first conversation stopped when he approached a group near the bar. Not rudely, worse than rudely, with a kind of distracted politeness that meant he simply wasn't the most interesting thing in the room anymore, and everyone present was aware of it except him. They excused themselves in ones and twos until he was standing with a full glass of whiskey and no one to hand it to. He looked for Naomi. She was gone, not in the room, not visible anywhere in the ballroom's considerable square footage. He spotted Lexi on the far side of the room in conversation with someone he didn't recognize. Her expression, the specific combination of horrified and fascinated that meant she was already recalibrating. Across the ballroom, Mia was surrounded. Not politely, not peripherally. Surrounded. The way people surround something they cannot quite believe is real. He recognized faces in the cluster. 2 investors he had been trying to schedule meetings with for the better part of 2 years. The charity chairwoman. A museum director. 3 executives from fashion houses whose names appeared in the same sentence as Elena Solis's in every profile he had ever skimmed. All of them leaning in. All of them laughing at something Mia had just said. Bianca appeared at his elbow. Her grip on his arm was precise and tight. Elena Solis personally sits on the board of the 2 foundations we have been trying to partner with for 18 months. Her voice was very quiet. "Do you understand what you've done?" Julian opened his mouth. For the first time in his professional life, nothing came out. He found her on the terrace at 20 past 10. She was standing at the railing with a glass of water. Not champagne, water. Looking out at the city in a way that suggested she had been enjoying the quiet and was not particularly surprised to have it interrupted. Julian had prepared words on the walkover. Measured, appropriate words. The kind he used in boardrooms when a situation required careful management. They left him completely the moment she turned around. "I'm sorry." Just that. Nothing before it, nothing after it. Raw, in a way he hadn't intended and couldn't take back. The invitation. The way I gave it. "I was trying to diminish you." A pause. "I've treated you as less than you are for 8 months. I'm sorry." The silence that followed was the longest of his professional life, and he had sat across tables from people who used silence as a weapon. This wasn't that. This was simply Mia, considering him honestly, the way she apparently considered everything. "Why?" she said. Quiet, genuinely asking. He opened his mouth. The honest answer arrived before the polished one could, which had never happened to him before. "Because I assumed I could." He heard how small it was as he said it. "Because you were there, and I never thought about whether you noticed." She nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." She looked at him for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was not unkind. "I believe you're sorry. And I forgive you, not because you've earned it yet, but because carrying it doesn't serve me." She set her glass on the railing. "But the part you have to carry now is understanding what that assumption revealed about you. Not about me. That part was never about me." She said it the way you tell someone something true, not to punish them, but because leaving them without it would be its own kind of cruelty. Mia's last morning at Thorne Enterprises was a Tuesday, 8 months after her first. She arrived at 7:52 a.m. out of habit, which made her smile briefly at the elevator doors. The 37th floor was quiet at this hour, just the low hum of the building settling into the day, the distant sound of someone's coffee machine in the kitchen down the hall. She sat at her desk and looked at it properly for the first time. There was almost nothing on it. 8 months, and she had accumulated so little. The succulent in its plain white pot. A single pen she had brought from home. The desk organizer she had bought in the first week, still holding its original 3 items in exactly their original positions. She had moved through this space for the better part of a year and left almost no trace of herself in it, which she had intended. But somehow it still surprised her, the neatness of her own absence. She was putting the succulent into her bag when Julian appeared in the doorway. No Bianca. No files under his arm. No agenda visible in his expression. Just a man standing in a corridor who had gotten something significantly wrong and had spent the intervening days arriving slowly at the full dimensions of it. He looked at the cleared desk, then at her. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "Next, I mean." Mia lifted her bag onto her shoulder. She considered him for a moment, the same honest consideration she had always offered him, which he was only now in a position to recognize for what it was. Then she smiled. The first real one she had given him in 8 months. It changed her face entirely. "Go home," she said, "and get to work." She walked past him down the corridor and did not look back. 8 months later, Paris. The venue was a converted warehouse near the Seine, the kind of space that holds light differently than it should, warm and specific, like it was designed for exactly this purpose. Elena Solis stood at the entrance greeting arrivals in her deep mauve silk taffeta gown, the wildflower embroidery at the hem catching the light with every step, structured at the shoulders and free everywhere else. She moved through the room with the quiet authority of someone who has never needed to announce herself. The front row held 50 seats. None of them were occupied by editors or executives or names that appeared on invitation lists. They were filled with personal assistants and office cleaners and caregivers and domestic workers, women and men who had spent their careers making other people's lives run without acknowledgement or credit. Every piece in the collection had been designed in direct collaboration with them. Their hands were in every seam. Mia stood backstage and watched through a gap in the curtain. She watched the moment the first model came out and a woman in the third seat pressed both hands to her mouth. She watched the quiet ripple move along the front row as they recognized themselves, not as subjects, not as inspiration, but as authors. She felt her mother appear at her shoulder and take her hand without speaking. They stood there together and watched. After the show, Mia moved through the venue and found Julian standing alone before a photograph on the exhibition wall. He had flown to Paris without being asked, which she had not expected, and which told her something she filed away carefully. The photograph showed a woman in her 60s, a personal assistant of 23 years. The caption read, "She made 3 executives' careers possible. None of them knew her last name." Julian had been standing in front of it for a long time. Mia picked up 2 glasses from a passing tray and handed him one. "We're all works in progress," she said. He looked at the photograph, then at her. He nodded, the slow, deliberate nod of someone filing something permanent. They touched glasses. The photograph watched from the wall. The measure of who you are isn't the power you hold. It's how you treat the people you think hold none.